Hey everyone, welcome back to Vote and Voice. Today I talk about something that's been in the news lately, and that's the phone ban in Texas schools. And this is a state law where students are not allowed to have their phones anymore. And this includes like the bathrooms, we're talking like even before school starts, in classrooms, like not at all. Like you cannot have your phone anytime, not even during lunch. And I'm going to talk about what this rule means and its like impact on students, schools, and society. So, first things first, the big thing about and this is personally, I disagree with this rule, but this is not about whether I like it or not. This is more about like just discussing kind of what this means to kids around Texas. So let's break down exactly what makes the impact on all these on this institution. So we'll talk about what makes phones useful. We use phones for like research, we use it for music, we use it for notes or comfort and planning, and even for like emotional support. Like phones can connect students to family and friends, like social media or messaging, and especially in emergencies. Even creativity is pretty big. Learning apps or art, just creativity is quite something. So now let's talk more about the problems. And this is just my opinion on it. But I see like one of the biggest things that I feel like we don't understand is like, you know, it feels like this whole school discipline thing just makes things more complicated, primarily because it feels like, the older generations really don't understand us that much, because these are much older people making these laws. It's not like Gen Z is making these laws or, these are much older people. And it feels like, we have this divide where they might not understand us. It feels like what they don't understand is that just because you ban phones does not mean that students will pay attention. And because will be a few students who will just not pay attention, they'll get bored easily. They'll just feel really, really frustrated about being in school and their life. I mean, these are like just because their age, discriminating based on their age, like, oh, because the way they behave in school, they suck. That's what the other older people think, and that's just because they behaved like that in school. Like, yeah, I get the whole school discipline thing, but like, this is about phones. And this encourages students to like hide or sneak phones, use it for lunch, maybe like outside at a restaurant. It just feels like uh, students really lose the chance to learn self-regulation. So now let's talk about the impact on students like mental health. So like feeling monitored and controlled can really increase stress and anxiety even for younger people. And same with their social life. Like, you may not even like they might with the phone, they might not even know where their friends are. If they want to hang out, they just have to randomly find each other. Students just might struggle to communicate with their own friends because, banning the phones may increase isolation for mental health. And the truth is, taking away from students' phones means that they'll like lose access to helpful study tools. And so, I mean, one big reason why the phone ban exists is likely because of the because like students may not be doing great like in terms of grades. It feels like we don't understand completely the so Now we'll talk about the impact on schools. So teachers may spend more time policing phones instead of teaching, and this could create more tensions between students and staff. And restrictive rules may stifle discussion on how to use tech responsibly, and it could lead to students who rely on phones for learning could be, at a disadvantage. They would have to find other ways without their phone. Of course, this is all just in school. They can definitely use it outside, but yeah, I think a lot of older adults often see phones as distractions and students see them as essential, like we're just in a different era. And we're not talking about past and present like this, and we're talking about like just now since and about like the impacts of all of this phone ban stuff. But yeah, it does really highlight a general divide. And it does reflect society's struggle with technology control. Because let's face it, like the biggest question is like how much is too much? And honestly, it might affect student independence and critical thinking long term. Like learning self regulation is different from being forced to comply. So this really signals a culture of control rather than collaboration. What does it teach students about authority exactly? That's a really important question. But how, in my personal experience, I mean, I don't live in Texas, but I definitely did have the experience where I had to like bring my phone. I didn't I was not the student who would argue against it. I just kind of accept it because I was going to use computers anyway. And let's be honest, like I'll admit, I was one of the students who was playing cool math games in class, like middle school, high school. Yeah, I was one of those students. And it just proves like even with that, even though I was not allowed to have phone, I was still playing that because of like the technology we're provided. And of course, like students are going to hide like, distractions because, let's face it, like some students are going to always find ways to distract themselves no matter what. That's just the reality. But yeah, another big thing is like, and just ask yourself, do these rules exactly solve the problem or they just create new ones? And I bet if you talk to like, your parents about it, I'm sure they would support the phone ban. And I understand. Like I get it, generational divide is all I have to say like for these kinds of topics. Like I'm sure if I told my parents like they would yeah, they would not understand me, but that's okay. That's just their views on the phone ban. Another question is, are these rules that seem pointless really teaching life lessons or does it just create tension? But yeah, to conclude all of this, banning phones, at least in my opinion, banning phones outright is just more harmful than helpful. And it shows a deeper struggle about trust, authority, and student development. But but the open question I have is what school rules feel pointless to you and how could they be reimagined or what could be a better alternative? Thanks for tuning in to Vote and Voice. These are the kinds of everyday rules that tell us a lot about society and how we live in it.